Welcome to the Journos. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh MacDonald and Stephen McGowan join me on the show today. Don't forget, if you're enjoying the content on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. And if you download the app, you'll get all the breaking news at your fingertips. There's so much to talk about. Of course, when the Journos falls the day after a full card in the Scottish Premiership, there's so much to talk about. And the big game is Pittodrie. It's Aberdeen 2, Rangers 1. It has so many layers for us to discuss, guys, it beggars belief. 9 points clear the Dons are. I think before we highlight the problems that Rangers are facing, what a run, Hugh.
Absolutely brilliant run, based in really strong fundamentals as well, based on getting a manager in that knows how to manage a team, knows how to set up a team, knows how to do it quickly, knows how to deal with limited resources and make the best out of it. And then, now the momentum. I mean, if you look back at Aberdeen over this run, there's been days where, late goals, they could have been beaten, now the momentum is huge, and anybody that's involved in football will tell you that what a commodity that is.
We were joking with Michael Grant on more than a few occasions, saying to him, we'll see you in November once you get through this difficult month of October. But boy, they've managed to get through all sorts of choppy waters and still come out with this 15 wins and 1 draw, Stephen.
We just keep hearing all this stuff about, they had an easy start to the season, don't we? Well, they've gone to Celtic Park. They've been 2 goals down, they've come back, they've got a draw. They've played Rangers, they've beaten them reasonably comfortably in the end. And I think the key for me to Jimmy Thelin is his substitutes, actually. Because if you look at the game at Celtic Park, he made 2 attacking substitutes at half-time. Against the D United last weekend, needed a winner, 0-0 going into final minutes, brings on Peter Ambrose, brings on his skipper Graham Shinnie, who'd left on the bench initially, gets the win. Last night, I think after maybe 64, 65 minutes, Rangers have got a really good goal, good equaliser back, look like quite dominant actually. And he makes a triple substitution, and Morris is one of the ones he brings on with Ambrose again, and it just shows things up and it gets them. But okay, look, the winning goal was against a run of play. The Rangers were certainly the stronger team in the second half, but it wasn't a surprise, that final outcome, was it? I don't think anybody would say they were surprised by the way that game finished up. In fact, the bigger surprise would be Rangers turning it around and winning 2-1.
The key is momentum. The key is the manager seems to be fairly level-headed about it all. Let's not forget as well, Papa Gay picked up an injury. It's not as if he's had plain sailing with his team selection, but he's also had, in my mind, someone who has gone about his business in the background and been a really key component for them, and that is their right-back, Nicky Devlin. He scores and sets one up last night. He's the man who gets the one back for Ambrose at the weekend.
And that's the interesting thing for me, is not just, we talked about, bringing Nielsen and who he knows, and I think Nielsen's hugely important to that team, just the sort of dirty work he does in midfield. But I think the key to any manager or coach is looking at players that we know very well, that we have watched down the ages, literally, and said, they're this is what they are, and they make them better. Nicky Devlin is a better player under Thelin. Graham Shinnie, I think, is a far better player. I mean, I think Graham Shinnie is added stuff. Graham Shinnie was a very good player. He played in the Championship, etc., etc. He's a decent player, but I think he's improved him. And I think that's and then the guy that comes on and scores the winner last night was out with a washing last season. He was one that Aberdeen fans said, get him away from this club, and he comes on and he terrorised Rangers with pace. That was another thing last night, was the differential in pace.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I loved it. I did a piece with Charlie Devlin, Nicky's dad, before the internationals. I mean, what a story. I mean, Nicky Devlin was released by Hamilton, 15, goes and plays for Drumchapel Amateurs where his dad is the president. He joins Dumbarton, he goes to Stenhousemuir, he's released by Stenhousemuir, he's released by Motherwell, he's released by Stenhousemuir. He's been written off so many times and he keeps coming back, and here he is at the age of 30, a Scotland international.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't all hand all that to Jimmy Thelin, you have to give the credit to the player. But my goodness, I mean, there are stories everywhere in this Aberdeen scenario, which are just brilliant to report on.
The one thing that I think is a key story in this, and this is sometimes, when you're looking at experienced managers or managers who've had relative success sometimes in their own country, the ones who can bring stability, simplify your role within the team, within a certain structure. Shinnie at one point, over the last year or two, people are looking going, his legs have gone. So you're looking at him trying to do things to drive Aberdeen forward, couldn't do it. Suddenly, the system is 4, Nielsen holding alongside Shinnie. Nielsen directs all the play. He's the linchpin for them. And then you've got other players that he's basically said, this is what you're good at. You do this, and then we'll play off this. And this is the way we are going to set up. I mean, even if I looked at the possession, Rangers 63% possession. But Aberdeen looked more menacing with what they had in possession.
We're going to move on to Rangers, I suspect. However, this is so damning for Philippe Clement, because all we ever hear from the Rangers manager at the minute is October will be 200% better, November will be better. It's all the promises of jam tomorrow. And we can't expect one transfer window to turn this team with its mere £60 million wage bill into a team of winners. Well, look at what Jimmy Thelin doing at Aberdeen.
Yeah.
He's come in jig time, he's taken this squad of players on a significantly lower wage bill, with a significantly lower spend, and he's given them that system, that identity, that profile that you really need to be a winning team, and he's done it in virtually no time at all.
Two elements that I want you guys to give us your thoughts on. First and foremost, the Dons fans are responding, even on the road, at home, 3 sellouts, flags, flares, flames, pyrotechnics, you name it, it's all there.
It's funny, last night, an old man like myself sitting in my dotage and round to my son's house to watch it, and then it comes on the telly, and you go, I've watched Aberdeen, I don't know, many decades. But that opening was... you go, what is happening here? I mean, Fergie used to talk about, you couldn't hear goals over the rustling of sweetie papers. I mean, it was just, I was sitting there going, that's... So 3 sellouts in a row, the whole thing going like a fair, and basically what has happened is great guys who have been in football all their lives, have been administrators in football, been in chief executives and chairman of football, you ask them, what's the most important thing about a football club? And they'll say, the manager.
Yeah.
Everyone changes
I'll tell you the other
because
thing I think is the most important thing about a football club, hope. Because if you look at what's really troubled Scottish football for so many years with clubs like Aberdeen and Hearts, it's been the absence of hope. They come up against Celtic and Rangers who've been like juggernauts for the most part. They've been frankly unable to compete, and there's just a kind of hopelessness around the entire game sometimes. And what Jimmy Thelin has come in and done is just said, hang on a minute, maybe we can compete with these teams, maybe we can give them a run for their money. And that for me is a far bigger thing for Scottish football than league reconstruction or summer football or any of the other kind of tropes that you want to mention. We just need a team like Aberdeen to come and say, we're here and we're going to compete.
Yeah, you're right about that opening, Hugh. I sent my mate a text who was at the game and I said, have Aberdeen declared war on anybody right now? Because the whole place was absolutely
I've never seen
mental.
it like, and I'm going to Aberdeen since the 60s.
Yeah.
Literally travelling up to Aberdeen. And even in the Fergie years, I've seen it loud. I've been at Aberdeen European games and it's been loud and raucous and things like that. But see, that's one of the great things about modern football is this great, and I know people have arguments pro and against pyro and accept all the arguments, but the spectacle that fans can create at football nowadays is just astonishing.
Well, it was incredible. The one last point before we get on to the debacle, which is Rangers, is quite simply, this is a manager who, if he can keep or at least get a substantial enough lead heading into that window, you wouldn't bet against him then maybe unearthing a couple of other little gems that he knows to supplement that squad and have a right go at it.
It's like Ange Postecoglou sounded with Celtic. If you think back to Ange coming into Celtic and he knew the low-hanging fruit from Japan. Now, the Scandinavian season's ended December, am I right in saying so? So when you go into the January window, you would hope that Jimmy Thelin, with the time he's had now to weigh things up and see what his needs and his requirements are, will know a couple of guys in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Scandinavian market who are accessible, who are available, who are affordable, who can come in and strengthen that team. And that's going to be a really fascinating scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, on to Rangers. Let's deal with the manager first of all. If we've been singing the praises of Jimmy Thelin, Philippe Clement looks like a man now who is just coming out with one ridiculous statement after another. I mean, at one point last night in the after-match interview, he said, if he's onside by a toenail, suddenly the game changes. And I thought, it's really getting a bit silly now.
I think I think he lost it about 6 months ago. I think he lost it round about the time. I think the big warning signs was the moral victory over in the lap of honour for a 3-each draw. I think that was a huge warning sign as well. When Clement came to Scotland, journalists made the calls and to contacts in France and Belgium, what we're getting, what was going to come over here, and by and large, the big red flag was it doesn't react well under pressure. Right, that was a consensual view, and I said, well, he's come to the wrong place because there is nothing but pressure at Rangers, and after an initial sort of honeymoon period, won a League Cup. Had a good run. Once the wheels came off, it's been, to continue the wheels come off analogy, it's been a car crash since then, and it's been most evident in his press conferences, which have astonishing moments. There's moments where he's got up doing the tiller girls. There's moments where he's talking about toenails. Moments last night, which was, I think most Rangers fans will look at and say this was our best performance of the season. The one where he goes and after a disappointing, they had 4 shots. I mean, these things are getting into the actual kind of the cultural psyche, and I think at one point last night when I was looking at him, I just went, God, you've gone.
Yeah. The only thing I would say, and this is the key element of this, and this is where possibly we might all disagree, on the back of the financial results, on the comments of John Bennett before he stepped down, on the comments of the interim chairman and John Gilligan, can they afford to sack him?
Well, they gave him a new 1-year contract extension. It's difficult to say if that would have changed the terms of his payoff. Possibly not. You get to the point where, I think as Hugh referred to there, when you lose a game like that, I don't think there's much a Rangers manager can say to make it better, but I think he can absolutely make it worse. And that's what Clement repeatedly does do with these comments that we're referring to. So you get such a level of fan disillusionment where you say, well, can they afford to pay him off given these financial figures, which are a car crash? Possibly not. But then you have to balance up, can they afford to not pay him off?
Yeah.
Because the supporters, Peter, are gone now. I mean, he's a dead man walking. You get to that point where I think the directors don't want to sack him. I think the John Bennett mindset of rinse and repeat and let's avoid that is uppermost in their thinking. And I kind of respect that because on one hand you think, well, how much difference can one managerial change make when the foundations are so poor, when there's a revolving door in the boardroom, when the finances are so bad? Can a change of manager really improve things so much? You might get a short-term bounce like you did when Clement came in 13 months ago. Will it change the overall scenario? The one thing it will do is get supporters off their back. I mean, I don't think, for example, all the Rangers tickets for the semi-final this Sunday are sold out. That's almost unheard of for semi-final at Hampden. So that shows you that apathy and anger is becoming a real problem. It will become a financial problem as well, Peter. Therefore, to answer your question, can they afford to not pay him off? Maybe not.
The breaking point is always when the fans are at the doors. That's always the breaking point. And that's when I think their hand is forced where they can't go anywhere. My point on can they afford to sack him is quite simply reading and listening to what the comments are coming out of that boardroom. when you've posted losses of 17 million, and the general feeling is next term's results are going to be equally as bad, but when you have an interim chairman saying we are now going for £8 million again with loans to try and to try and basically steady the ship.
Yeah, the fundamental problem always going to be faced with Rangers to the particular cycle is that you have a club which there is no quick and easy solution to this. There's still a kind of mindset that a kind of sugar daddy or a Mr. Big will come in and throw 50 to 100 million pounds at it and everything will be okay. Everyone will doff their cap and everything will be okay. That's not the solution. There is no overnight solution to this. Financial sustainability of UEFA restricts it to 70% of their spending and their turnover. You also have the fact that, you know, there's no one really banging down the door out there. The only way to really change this and improve it is to do the hard work and the hard miles. That means developing a proper player trading model. It means Champions League football. Two of the pillars that they spoke about at the AGMs, which they've miserably failed to deliver. And until they get there, I don't really see much changing. But against that, it's a long-term rebuilding job. You have this incredibly impatient fan base. And how you square that circle, I don't know.
That is the most damning part of this whole scenario for me, because quite simply you have a generation of entitlement who think that Rangers are this club that should be the number one club in Scotland. So they are always banging the drum. You then have, as we were talking about there, Hugh, a situation where you have £17 million in losses, but if you are then getting to a situation where you need 8 million and you have a disenchanted fan base, you have to then pay off one set of managers, a manager with his backroom staff, and then go and try and recruit another. That takes a little chunk of the money, and then the manager then comes in and says, well, I don't like what I've inherited, and you're going to give me something.
Well, the manager says that before he comes in. The manager sits down and says, right, how much am I getting to think? And none of this airy-fairy will back you to, no, let's get figures down. Because I think it's becoming increasingly clear that Clement, who has been backed really well actually, you can have no complaints about that, but I think he didn't, in fact I'm sure he didn't realise what he was stepping into. I don't think he did the deepest of due diligence that he might have done, because with a manager coming in now is going to look at this from the outside, see the figures, see what's happened to Clement. And remember, Clement's CV was pretty decent. He'd won titles in Belgium, he'd managed Monaco. And say to yourself, is this a job I really want? This is the big problem with Rangers at the moment, because if you look at it from the outside, you say, right, who's running that club? Two retired guys, you know, John Gilligan and George Latham, who isn't on the board, you know, are running this.
Yeah.
You've got a kind of absentee landlords, people abroad come. So the day-to-day running, and we all know the litany of they haven't got a chief executive officer, they haven't got director of football, they haven't got this, they haven't got that, they haven't got the next thing. So then we look at this and says, is this something I really want to take on? There will be people who will say yes, but they won't be there. They'll be there.
Yeah.
But maybe it's time for that realism to set in, that that's what needs to happen. Yeah. Instead of going, going, let's get a big name from Europe, maybe you just need someone who comes in, who knows how to play the game in Scotland, who will inject some pragmatism to the situation and basically cut their cloth to suit.
But that's a perfectly logical and rational point of view, as is the actual strategy for what it is that John Bennett first enunciated, that we have to do this next thing. But we said it. He said, that's all great in paper. But it's not great on the Thursday morning when you just lost it 2-1 at Aberdeen, you're 9 points behind the league. It's not so great then.
The other big problem here with this whole scenario is you can't even get to a situation. Now we've already highlighted the manager's failings, and after every press conference he seems to make it worse. You then have to look at his team and say, well, there's no identity, there's no style. No. I can't see anything that says this is a Philippe Clement side, the way you can say this is a Brendan Rodgers side.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can even say this is a Jimmy Thelin side.
Yeah.
Or a Derek McInnes side.
That's what absolutely damns him. People can't see what he's trying to do. They can't see any structure. They can't see any obvious tactics. Effectively, if Rangers are going to get something from a game, they're relying every time on a moment of brilliance from a Bayrami, for example, like we did last night. Brilliant goal, really great moment of individual talent, and then he takes him off. I mean, I was staggered by that. I mean, Bayrami was the only player who looked like he could bring, he had one for the offside goal in the first half, which, by the way, the offside lines in that, like so many of the offside lines of Scottish football, I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
But really great moment where he turns his full-back, Nicky Devlin, I think it was, drives it in, McGowan puts it in, then he had really quick feet for that goal. And within 5 or 10 minutes of doing that, the manager pulls him off the pitch. And you're thinking, what in God's name are you doing, man?
Yeah. The other aspect of this, and this is where I'm going to flip it, is quite simply you have a situation in the background where not only does John Gilligan and George Latham have to try and work out, okay, where are we going to get someone? And shrewd businessmen usually only take over cases like Rangers when it's reached its absolute bottom end so they can pick it up for a swan song. That's the first thing. This notion that there's a multi-millionaire, billionaire who loved Rangers, was brought up in Govan and suddenly went away and made millions everywhere else. They're not out there. They're not out there in their tens. They're not out there in their hundreds. You're struggling to find one who's got that mindset to say, I was brought up in Scotland, I was brought up a Rangers fan, I'm going to give them money willy-nilly. So the biggest job for John Gilligan is to try and, first of all, stabilise it, but he also has a problem going on in the background. You've got 4 or 5 people who are the main investors now, who all have a stake in the club, Stephen, and they all are actually jockeying around for power.
Yeah, there's the old saying about managing by committee, isn't there? And that's very much what's happening at Rangers. I mean, I know 1 or 2 of the people involved, and they're reasonable people who want the best for Rangers. They absolutely are trying their best to put probably the limit of the money they can put into the club. And now they need new investors, and there's this debt for equity swap which diminishes the value of the club. Where I think if you were to turn all the shares into money now, the club will be worth about 22 million quid or something.
Yeah.
So they can't carry on in this pattern. But equally, they're bringing in a multi-millionaire to transform it overnight. That's not going to work either, because there's only way you can get out of this, to go back to the point, is to do the important basics well, to recruit well, to sell a Matt O'Reilly or a Jota every year for 17 to 20 million quid, to secure Champions League football. You've got to get those fundamentals right. There's no quick fix silver bullet here.
And the problem with that, and this is probably the final point on it, there is no quick fix. If you are then saying, right, we are going to bite the bullet here, we are going to stick to what John Bennett said, we are going to stick with the interim chairman, we are going to stick to this pathway to try and develop younger players, bring in younger players, reduce the average age in the side. If you do that, Hugh, you are walking a tightrope, which is basically you could get knocked out of a cup because there's inexperience in there. The players that you brought in, the poor recruitment is coming home to roost. The third element of it, which I think is the most important for the board, is when you're trying to do that in this balancing act, if you can't even get a shot at rolling the dice on the £60 million jackpot of the Champions League, if you can't even get 2 qualifiers to try and get in there, if Aberdeen are suddenly in second place, you're denied that. Everything that you're thinking about is out of the window, because then your fallback position then must be, to save the club, is cut wages again.
Yeah, and then when you say, then you've got to look at income. And a vast a portion of income in Scottish football clubs, as against clubs in the English Premier League and elsewhere, comes from the fans. It doesn't, the Rangers have vastly improved their merchandising. You saw that in their commercial income. You saw the figures, but it comes from the fans. Rangers can rely on, season ticket, book, sell out every year. Can they rely on that going forward? Is the appetite for that? Stephen talked about hope. Rangers coming up the leagues, the fans backed him totally because there was this hope of a sunnier day tomorrow. They called it the journey. We'll get back the sunny uplands. But if you're saying not just selling to supporters, but showing supporters that this is going to be a long, hard road, you're going to go off the road, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to lose at Pittodrie, and you're not going to be in the shake-up for a league, and this might be long term. Does that have an impact on season ticket? I think it does.
Yeah.
And in European football as well, it's not just fan income. When European football's huge, and that's why we go back to this argument of can they afford to stand by him now? 9 points behind. They need to get that crack at the Champions League you referred to. It's going to be qualifiers now because the coefficient is taking a bit of a dent. You can only be there if you're one of the top two teams. They're third, they're 9 points adrift. So do you now take remedial action to repair that? That's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, and the ultimate thing that I think most sensible Rangers fans nowadays, as well as looking at results on the park, they're not fooled by the spin off the park. I mean, I almost fell off the chair when it said, great news is Rangers are no longer in court with anybody. And I thought, wow, is that the spin from the financial
Some
figures?
great social media memes though, isn't it? You know, there's some great stuff flying about. Yeah, I mean, the scales have fallen off the eyes, and that's another problem for the board of directors. That effectively that's what's going to really cause them a major problem. Not just anger, but more damningly, apathy.
Yep.
Flip side of this, and this is what this city is all about. It is when one is in the doldrums and the other one is absolutely flying high. The difference between them, Celtic go out and defeat Dundee. Rotation in the squad is there for Brendan Rodgers. The difference between them on and off the park is the Grand Canyon and then some. Yeah,
and it's not just financial as well, because we talk about what a Rodgers team is. You just had to look at the highlights last night and you saw, Rodgers, he's taken a deep breath, Brendan, this season, and he's obviously not this one game at a time thing. He's obviously thrown that out the window, and he's sitting down with his staff and his sports science, and he's got a big list of this is the games coming up. And here are the games where I think we'll do all right and win, and we'll use, we'll bring in players. And it's coated with substantial danger, because the two major times he's done it is Falkirk and why insisting calling the League Cup, where they were up against it for a spell in the game, and then last night when you're sitting at 60 minutes or whatever, nothing each against Dundee, it can get tasty. Where he's got though is what he can bring on. I mean, last night he probably had 6 in the team that wouldn't be starters, I would say, and I now include Greg Taylor in that. But he can bring on what he brings on, Johnson, Hatate, Maida, and then he can change it. I mean, he probably would have brought on Ida as well if he'd have been in fit as well. That's what he's got on the bench. He's got the get out of jail card sitting on the bench. So even at Ross County as well, where Ross County teams in the Premier League or the Premiership can do very well for 60, 70 minutes, and then they're sweating. And John McGlynn said it with Falkirk. We're doing really well now, and then they see the guys warming up on the sideline. You go, oh my goodness, got to go again. So that's what they've got, and they've got that through. They've got that through good business. They've got that through because they've earned the money, and so they've earned the right to do that.
The most significant point for me, though, Stephen, in all of this, yes, you can beat Dundee. I wonder where, but for a blip and a draw, I can't see them losing games, because they've got that abundance of quality on the bench. I can't see them losing games domestically. But where I judge them and where I'm looking at it is, there's no doubt Brendan is a good coach. But to become an even better coach or a great coach, that result against Atalanta for me was a significant line in the sand. No matter what way, and again, we're too old in the head to listen to the spin on things. He can call it pragmatism and he can have his wee dig at everybody. But the point is this: he had to change the tactics and the way Celtic played to actually sit in and say, do you know what? We are going to rough it out here and get a really good, hard-fought point against Atalanta by sitting in, keeping it a solid bank of 4, backed with 5, and even the centre forward is going to track back so we can get 11 behind the ball. And Celtic fans who made that journey, spent their money, were delighted.
Stuff the Celtic way, stuff the Celtic DNA. People just want to see results. They just want to see their team competing in European football. And I think what Bergamo did was it set the template for what has to happen in away games in Europe now, didn't it? It just, I mean, Dortmund, yeah, they were bad fortune with penalties and deflections coming up, but it was a fiasco. There's no other way to put it. It simply wasn't good enough. And as you say, you can't brush over that or disguise it, but lessons were learned, and maybe that's what a good coach does. And he did tighten it up and he did improve it, and he's now set the template. And you know what? If Celtic play that way every away game and take a point in Zagreb and they get to the playoff round, that will be, for me, significant progress in Europe this season. So that's what they have to do now. They've got their bonus point from Italy away, actually. So they've got, obviously, the Leipzig on Tuesday, one of the home games. That's not a gimme. You've then got Young Boys, you've got Club Bruges. There are 3 home games, which are good opportunities to take 9 points. My goodness, if they take 6 points now, they'll probably be okay.
Yeah, absolutely, because you only have to look at what the majority shareholder, Dermot Desmond, said in an interview the other week there, which, again, we all had that mindset saying, this group, the way it's come together for them, it's a chance for them to qualify. The way this new structure is, this is a great opportunity to qualify for that one knockout game, which Brendan Rodgers can then turn around and say, I'm a success, because that's what he was brought back for. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Dermot Desmond said, you know, if we can nick a point away from home and then 2 home wins, you're going to be there.
Absolutely. And he's got the tools to do it at the moment, because one of the things that's been overlooked, and I thought Clement did make a point last night domestically, one thing that's helped Aberdeen is going out of Europe. Aberdeen have got a week to prepare for games, yep. and it's not just prepare for games, but it's helped the legs. I'll be interested to see the match-up between Celtic and Aberdeen on Saturday. I think Thelin will obviously have to try and refresh it some way. But Rodgers knows that he can bring 5 in. I think McGregor will probably come back. Carter Vickers will start. Johnson will start. You know, they'll bring the big guns back fresh after a week, and then try them again go again on the Tuesday. So he's got the resources there now. He's got a good squad. I think the big lesson was learned in Dortmund. I think fiasco is the precise word for it. We spoke before the game in Dortmund, and we both predicted a heavy Celtic defeat. With me saying this isn't a great Dortmund side, this is the poorest Dortmund side for a long time. The coach is
in serious pressure now, isn't he?
Yeah, real serious pressure. Yeah. They're out their FA Cup by Halloween. Yeah. They're out the league. They're 7th in the league now.
Yeah.
So that it was.
He got his tactics wrong, Hugh.
Absolutely. But his thinking after it was amazing as well, because he had all those things about it wasn't a 7-1. No, it was a 10-1. Seriously,
exactly.
I was there. I was watching it. It was a 10. We weren't. I mean, when we weren't blind to what was going on in the park, Brendan. So I think one of the interesting things is, as a coach and in life, a person, you've got to learn when you get it wrong, not to do it again. And all this stuff, as you say, all this sophistry, that I've not changed my way of playing, really. Yes, you did, and it's fair enough to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, there's no crime for Brendan to become a better coach, a little modicum of humility. Get on with it. As Stephen says, just get the results. At the end of the day, what you don't want is humiliated and talking about playing the Celtic way. I love listening to the absolute crap that comes out of some fans, especially in England. We want a manager who plays the West Ham way, and I'm like, wow, what is that, an FA Cup every 30 years and then bumped?
Well, how reminiscent of the Lisbon Lions was Martin O'Neill's Celtic team? Not reminiscent at all. But they won games, and they won games in Europe, and they took them back to a final, and that was the bottom.
And how reminiscent of Jock Stein's Lisbon Lions was Jock Stein's Dukla Prague away team.
Yeah.
Steen went to Prague and there wasn't maybe busted. Put the Sharabang up.
Yes.
And those days, every Celtic player will tell you that. So Steen, who won the European Cup, as they say, playing beautiful, vibrant football, had got to the European Cup final, but putting up the shutters in Prague.
A wee bit of Catenaccio never did anyone any harm, and that's exactly what Brendan Rodgers displayed.
The last, you look at how Rangers under Van Bronckhorst, and certainly Rangers under Walter Smith, got to European finals. I miss the word pragmatism.
Catenaccio.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it's intriguing. Just on that point, and I might as well get your predictions on it. I have, a great ding-dong battle with so many great people, Aberdeen fans, who are absolutely giving me pelters on it when we were talking about the month of October. They deserve great credit. We know they're going to hit a dodgy patch. Everybody does. Is their first dodgy patch coming in the semi-final this weekend?
I think so. And because I think actually Celtic... Listen, the way Celtic finished last night, that will need to improve. But Celtic should have beaten them at Celtic Park. Could have been 3-0 before half-time, that would have been that. Aberdeen were excellent. I really loved the way they went about it. And believe me, I want this Aberdeen run to go as long as humanly possible because it's invigorating for Scottish football. But if you're asking, in a one-off game at Hampden, will they beat Celtic in the semi-final? For me personally, I think Celtic will nick it.
Hugh?
Yeah, I think all the odds are in Celtic's favour. I think, what we've got to understand is what Thelin's got for Saturday in terms of refreshing the team and looking at what Brendan Rodgers has for Saturday and refreshing his team. And the simple answer is that if you go 1 for 1, and by the way, that's one of the great things about Thelin, he goes man for man at times. He's really an aggressive manager. At Celtic Park at one time, he was going man for man on that park. So he's an aggressive manager. But if you look man for man through the teams, I think you see Celtic.
But if he does it, and if he gets to this final and he wins this trophy, listen, they're absolutely going to have to be acknowledged as the real deal.
Yeah,
I think they're the real deal.
Absolutely, I think they're title contenders. You have to say without necessarily saying they're going to win the league. Are they title contenders? Absolutely, they are.
Yeah, and another thing about it as well, and sometimes sometimes it gets difficult if you're a chairman who's a fan. But if you were suddenly sitting in Aberdeen, have got a chance to win the League Cup, and they're in the final by knocking out Celtic, and you're still 6 to 9 points ahead of Rangers in the January transfer window, I'd be turning around and saying, OK, I'm going to take an extra couple of shekels out here. Jimmy, go and get the 2 or 3 players you need.
I think he's going to do that anyway.
Second.
I think he's going to do that, even if they, and because I think if they do have a stumble and I don't see it, the converse argument applies. He'll say, right, we've had a wee wobble. We need to back the manager to get him back on the. I think they just do it, and Stephen makes a great point that. I think Thelin will have 3 or 4 sitting in the waiting lounge at the moment.
And the other aspect of this, and remember, football can twist within, a millisecond when a chairman or a board makes a decision based on the pressures of a fan base that has expectations that are way ahead of the reality right now. I still think Philippe Clement, as I sit here on this programme, will be the manager for the semi-final against Motherwell. Defeat is unthinkable.
It's unthinkable, but it's not impossible. I just think there's a whole kind of. We're talking about the momentum behind Aberdeen, and it was visible. It was visible, particularly in the second half, where they're second best for lots, and you just see yourself. Somehow I think they'll get out of this. It wasn't a shock when they did get out of it, and I think the reverse applies to Rangers. When you're watching them now, you just think, it's like watching one of these things, there's something bad's going to happen.
Well, listen, Hugh, the last 10 away games, but we deemed that games away from Ibrox effectively. They've won 2. Alistair Johnson has scored more away goals this season than Rangers. I mean, the stats damn him on every available piece of data you look at. And, actually, we can almost sit here and talk ourselves into the fact that he does have to go. But we go back to this point. Is the will, is the finance is the immediate need there to do it? And with you, Peter, I think he'll still be in charge possibly by Sunday.
Yeah, if he loses to Motherwell, I think he'll get sacked. That's my point on it. I think he's got to win. It won't be pretty. It's not been pretty. There's no fluency to that side. There's no DNA that we all talk about that you can see in a winning side. It will be ugly, and I think they might get through. If they don't get through, because let's not forget, Motherwell under Stuart Kettlewell have produced some really good results this season. If they don't get through, then I think the clamour is too great. I think by Monday they're starting to look and say to themselves, okay, we talked about longevity, but the fans are not having it.
No. My point of view, if it was up to me, I would be having discussions today. I think it's gone beyond appeal for me. But I can see why. I can see the argument for retaining them. But what happens with these situations, and we've seen it on all lives in football, is it suddenly becomes untenable. And one of the things is the death by 1,000 cuts where, say he does win the League Cup semi-final and then gets the final and loses, and then it starts again, then wins against Ross County whatever at home, and it limps on and gets beat by Celtic. Yeah. It just becomes you're going to look at it. I just looked at that team, that Rangers team last night, and I just thought there wasn't what's the word for the grit in it? That way of let's dig ourselves out of this. The commentators quite rightly kept pointing out to Scott Arfield, scoring, Rangers been down 2-1 and winning 3-2. And I remember watching that game and thinking, Rangers aren't out of this. Aberdeen were on the back foot, a different kind of performance and that. And Rangers were pushing, they were aggressive, and there was guys like Arfield in the team. Last night you're looking at you going, see if the penalty had gone in at 2-0. I think you could have said that was it.
I actually drew the wind out of Aberdeen's sails. No question about that. That really extracted the sting from them, and they struggled after that a bit actually. Was it a penalty? I think in the current rules it probably was. I think if your arms extended like that, but it's one of those where you're looking and going, pre-VAR, no chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the referee doesn't give it.
No, exactly. Rather than dissect the other games game by game, I think there are interesting points that I like to draw from it, and one of them is sometimes when a manager says something but he leaves it in the air for everybody to actually start looking and thinking, okay, there are 3 or 4 incidents I can put my mind to that I know about, but what else does he talk about in the background? And I'm talking about Stephen Robinson, because Stephen Robinson ends a 4-game losing streak with St Mirren. Too good a manager, to get rattled by a losing streak. Keeps a steady hand on it, but utters the lines in the press conference basically saying that as a manager, there are so many things that you have to deal with in the background that fans don't know. Some they get to know about, some they'll never get to know about, that derail the club and the way he wants them to play and go. Now, I can justify Stephen Robinson's signings in my head, because in a club like St Mirren, when you've qualified for Europe, sometimes you have to take players that are damaged, that you hope that you wouldn't probably get a sniff of them to sign them at any other time other than the train is stopped at the station. You say, I'm going to take a chance on him. And Stephen Robinson's looked, Van Veen's one of them. Rooney has absolutely derailed his manager. What else in the background is going on, I do not know. But slowly but surely he has to now, having engineered 2 that we do know and some that we don't know in the background, he's managed to engineer a win, and a deserved one at that, in the battle against St Johnstone.
So it was 3 different goals chalked off. I think St Johnstone are fascinating as well. They've got the 2 strikers up there, Kipioka and Sidibe, who just they're really good for goals. They're powerful, they're fast, they're really dangerous, but they're going to leak goals and hemorrhage, and St Mirren benefited from that. I think St Mirren had a problem because, going back to what we're talking about of Aberdeen, European football and domestic football and juggling those competing demands are really difficult. I think for the provincial clubs in particular who don't have the resources. Yeah, it was all with Kilmarnock, absolutely. And it's taken a bit of time to get back on the wagon again. But you know what? They showed good signs against Rangers at Ibrox. They've pulled it out last night. I think St Mirren will still win more home games. Guys like Mark O'Hara, just real stalwarts, good Premier League players. St Mirren will be okay for me. I think they'll be okay. They're going to have these bumps in the road. And Stephen Robinson's pragmatic enough to acknowledge that. So much so, if Hibs eventually decide that maybe it's time to change their manager, he absolutely should be top of the list for me.
Well, amazingly, you know, I've had him at the top of the list for a couple of them. I thought he was an absolute stick on to be talked to by the Hearts board, and they didn't talk to him in a way that, you know, you'd have been favourite. But I look at them and he brings me nicely on to the next point is, with St Johnstone's an interesting case of the way they're playing. They had the majority of possession last night and lost the game. Again, you're talking about Sidibe, you're talking about Kimpioka, who scored 10 goals for St Johnstone. Yeah. So they, for me, are the spoilers in a Hibs side that might have got off the bottom of the table. But boy, I've watched them, Hugh. I'm going to be fair to them. They deserve to win the derby on chances alone, but there's no cohesion to that side.
Well, one of the interesting debates, because it's you know, rightly you're thinking about Rangers and talking about Rangers Aberdeen, is the Edinburgh debate.
Oh,
it's mad. The two teams. I mean, it's not far off a disaster. Certainly in financial terms for Hearts. I mean, you're now looking at Hearts and saying, well, Aberdeen's gone, you know. I mean, they're in the distance. You know, matter if Aberdeen wobble and become third, and we've agreed that is not a likelihood. It could happen, but Hearts are sitting there at the moment and saying, what time does it come to a discussion of can we get in the top six? I mean, seriously, when does that discussion happen? They lose again. An interesting thing about you know, your McInneses and your Robinsons and whatever coming into, you know, coach rescue these clubs is, under the current climate, they are very far down the pecking order. The culture now is, and guys like Jimmy Thelin has reinforced it, and St Johnstone have followed it as well, is let's get a foreign coach.
Yeah, British managers are an endangered species now. Really.
Yeah, even in the English Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely, especially.
So scarce.
Because guys now at the top, and you look at these analytic guys at Hearts, and you look at the backers of Hibs, they've got different viewpoints. They've got a different strategy of how they work, and basically, I mean, I'd be absolutely shocked if somebody like Stephen Robinson got anywhere near.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, we're told that Bill Foley and Black Knights Football Club didn't want David Gray. Possibly didn't want Malcolm Mackay either, and that's been part of the reason why they've had to have these kind of summit talks in Las Vegas, because, you know, they've been coming at cross purposes, because Bill Foley, like Jamestown Analytics, will want to employ a more data-led approach. I don't worry about Hearts. I mean, I think Hearts and Hibs generally are the great underachievers. I mean, I was at Atalanta last week there. You're looking at Atalanta. Bergamo is a city of 125,000 people. Slightly more or less than Dundee. The stadium has 25,000 seats. They employed a good coach. They employed data. They employed evidence-based. You know, they did all the basics right. And they've turned this relatively modest provincial club in Italy into a European superpower. And okay, they have a better TV deal, but you're looking at that and you're looking at it, Rangers. You're also looking at Hearts and Hibs and saying, what is to stop a Scottish club building something like that? And I do hope that when Hearts get the data and analytics up and running, they'll still get a chance of window to bring in players, that they're going to improve. They're going to sign better players. The ones I worry about are Hibs. I don't know where Hibs are going. You know, you look at the recruitment in the summer there. The keeper doesn't look great. 2 centre-halves are no better than what they had. Their main dangers are closer to 40 than they are 30. I think Junior Hoylett and Gale. So, you know, they don't look in a good position. And right now, for me, if they continue as they are, I don't think you can dispute their relegation possibilities.
They've got to be the only club in that league that's managed to replace 3 out of the back 4 with 3 more inept players in the back 4.
Absolutely.
And that's what's costing them, Hugh.
I didn't even mention Lewis Miller, who's been getting dogs abuse for his performances. So, you know.
I think I would agree that the Hibs are the ones that really have to do a lot of soul searching and do it quickly, because Hearts again have got the get out of jail card, that they've got money and they can go again in January. They've got they've got backers in the background. We know who they are, who will fund stuff even under FPP. You know, they've got room for manoeuvre. Hibs, in contrast, it seems like the problem with Hibs is there doesn't seem to be any cohesion. There doesn't seem to be a joint strategy of this is what we want and this is how we're going to go about it. And at one point they've got to say, right, this is the road we're walking down and we're going to walk down this road.
Well, if they don't start listening to Bill Foley now, if they don't give that a chance, when the guys put $6 million in, then hell mend them. Because whatever they've been doing hasn't been working. So they need to try something different. So I think it's time to actually say, okay, what have you got for us?
Yeah, I'm not so sure the manager's going to survive it. And that's the key to it all, you know. Nice guy that David Gray is.
The manager's always a patsy in this situation anyway. I mean, the manager's always going to be the easy fix that isn't a fix. I mean, the problems at Hibs are not coach led. I mean, he might influence. We're not letting him off the hook by any manner. I mean, the problems at Hibs goes far beyond who's managing the first team.
Should you ever? And we go back to this debate we used to have with Barry Robson about Stephen Naismith. Should a club like Hearts, Hibs and Aberdeen ever have a first-time manager in the dugout? For me, no.
Absolutely, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You get a situation where suddenly clubs, and I'm not just talking about big clubs in Scotland, big clubs all across Europe suddenly employ somebody in the biggest job, the business, which is all consuming, and they give it to a novice. It's got to be the only industry where that regularly happens. And it brings me nicely to the point, if we've dissected Rangers just before we finish, you suddenly have a situation where there might and there may well be a change of tact from Manchester United, who've gone through 6 managers, a couple of little interim bosses, trying to replace Sir Alex Ferguson. And Sir Alex Ferguson came into that job having broken the monopoly of Rangers and Celtic and won European trophies, 2 of them.
But the thing about you see change time in Manchester. I think Manchester have just signed Ten Hag as manager again. Only he's got a different name. If you look at the CVs, I mean, they're very
talking
similar.
about Amorim.
Amorim. If they get Amorim is Ten Hag with a Portuguese accent. He's got the same, basically the same philosophy of playing football. He's got the same, probably slightly less stellar.
I think he might. I'm not sure he'll play the same. I'm not sure he'll play the same formation. I think he likes to play a back 3, Hugh.
But he still
likes to be pragmatic with him dropping into a 5
and dynamic, hit on the break. Ten Hag was always a manager that didn't value possession the way that some did. He wanted. And in their greatest victories, particularly against Man City in the FA Cup, was transitions won them games.
Yeah.
Liverpool, that what could have been his signature win in the FA Cup, hitting Liverpool on the break, devastating style. Amorim will be very like that, and he's out the same school as Ten Hag. Again, I think with Manchester United, if you looked at it since Ferguson left, the way that they went is that every manager there's been a decent choice of it. Yeah, you could see why Moyes got it. I mean, people laugh at that now, but Moyes went on to do very well at West Ham, and you could see why he got it. And they said, well, they should go down the road of big hitters. Well, they did. They got Mourinho and Van Gaal. And they didn't want to say, I should get somebody in that, quotes, knows the club, so they get Solskjaer. And then they say, I should get a really bright European coach. And you get Ten Hag. I mean, so that suggests to me that what's happening at Manchester United, the manager is part of it, but it goes beyond.
Do you know what it suggests to me, what you've just said there? It suggests to me that they have no idea who or what they are as a club any longer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This to me is a problem for Man United, like so many of these vast European superpower clubs. I mean, they had an identity under Alex Ferguson. You knew who they were, the kind of club they were. It's hard to define what identity is, but I think you know what I mean. You know, I mean, there was a kind of British core in the dressing room.
He also had the boardroom right though.
Yes.
He had David Gill.
Yeah,
he had a group that were backing him 100%. He had Sir Bobby Charlton. So he had that structure in place. This is what we're talking about with Rangers.
Stability.
There's
And it's
nothing there.
completely gone now. You know, you've got Ineos coming in, of course. You've still got the Glazers lurking in the background. This kind of management by committee thing with kind of competing franchises, if you like. And they are just bagatelling around with players and managers. Just people who, no real connection. You know, I know there's always a joke about Man United fans, but it just feels like nobody really knows what Manchester United are or what they should be anymore.
Yeah.
They've just become another plastic football club.
I agree, and I agree. I think the Glazers pulled the pants down of Ineos and Realism. The money they spent, over £1 billion for about 25%. And 100% of the trouble.
Yeah.
And you're bringing in guys that might be able to run oil refineries, might be able to put cyclists up the Alpe d'Huez, but it's a different game if you're in the Premiership and you've got to win the Premiership. You've got this stuff about the end of Arsene Wenger for me was when he was saying, "Oh, finishing fourth is like winning a trophy." No, it's not. You're Arsenal. You know, and Manchester United are going down the line there. Oh, finishing fourth is like, no, you're Manchester United.
You don't even think about them as serious contenders now.
Isn't that a shock?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's indicative of also when we started the programme talking about the signing policies and the strategy that Aberdeen now seem to have got right. They went through 3 or 4 managers. They went through that same pain. We talk about Rangers, that structure, that battle in the boardroom, the manager, that's not getting it right on the park, and then you suddenly go to one of the biggest clubs in the world, and you find those similar problems, that vein that goes through all of them. You need the boardroom fighting in the same direction. You need an understanding of what the DNA is of the club, and you also need to get the fans on board, and you need a manager who absolutely is the linchpin.
And actually, the Man United thing shows it's not just as simple as bringing in somebody with deep pockets.
No.
Because
600 million.
Yeah, there are similarities between Man United and Rangers. You don't know what you're going to get for the team on any given day. There is boardroom instability. The difference is Man United have pots of money, Rangers don't. But the pots of money have not necessarily brought Man United instant success. And
you watch Man United now as to compare to the glory years, and you go, the way I watched Rangers last night, you just say, what is there minerals in this team?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I don't think we started off positive about Aberdeen, and then it just got negative and more negative and more negative. And usually at that point, when I had a chat with my fellow journalists in the morning, when we were having 25 minutes of a phone call, and I say, "Any good news?" and they go, "No," and they just put the phone down. And that's what we're going to do here. Incidentally, we've got the Luka Modric top in the background throughout all the programmes this week and last week, giving you the chance to win the top. All you have to do in the comments section below is tell us which club did Real Madrid sign Luka Modric from, and you've got a chance to win this. You double your chance if you hit the subscribe button as well. We'd love for you to be taking that home. Nice wee Christmas filler for you as well. There's lots of competitions on the way. We've even got Ruffy and Tam McManus acting, which is, it has to be seen to be believed. There's lots to look forward to as far as the content's concerned. Give us your view on some of the topics we've been discussing. We'd love to hear from you. But for today, Hugh MacDonald, Stephen McGowan, myself, Peter Martin, thank you for listening and watching.